Today, I want to go through the DC films in the DCEU. I want to look back at these movies and see what I originally gave it and what I would give it today. Because the thing is opinions can change all the time. Your feelings and interests can change all the time. And I feel like there are movies in here that at one point when I saw it, I really enjoyed it. And now when I look back at it, I don't really like them at all, or maybe vice versa. I do make reviews for movies on this channel in which sometimes it comes from the height of recency bias. It's just after I watched the movie and I'm really focused on everything I did like opposed to the things I didn't like. And sometimes when there are things you don't like, you just kind of pass it off as I don't really agree with it, but it is what it is. And sometimes negatives can be looked at that way, but then sometimes in film, there are negatives that are just straight up negatives and they're not good. So let's get into this and let's start with the first DCEU film. With Man of Steel, this is a movie rating that has never changed for me. It's never gone up, it's never gone down, and the reason why it's never had to go up is because it's already a 10 out of 10. I have expressed so many times on this channel how much I love this movie. It is my second favorite comic film of all time, and it would probably find itself lying in my top 5 films of all time. And like I said, opinions change. A couple years ago, I made a video talking about my top 10 comic films, and on that list, I believe I had Man of Steel at 3 or 4. And now when I look at it today, I'm wrong. I would actually have it at number 2. For me, it goes The Dark Knight and then right after, Man of Steel. I love everything of which Man of Steel chose to do, the differences in creativity they took. Superman was a character I was never really interested in, and thanks to this movie, not only did I find the character interesting, but I had a new, profound amount of respect for the character. We all know Superman is the hopeful character, and I think what they captured so well is making Superman hopeful through adversity. And I loved seeing Superman learn what it meant to be hopeful. And the simple fact that you can't just wake up, put on the cape, stand in front of people and say everything's gonna be okay. You gotta fight for it. Next up, we have Batman vs. Superman. Now, this is a movie when it first came out. I had it at about an 8 out of 10 when I watched the theatrical version. I saw this movie 4 times in theaters, and I thought the theatrical version was obviously missing something. When I look at the theatrical version today, it is ever so clearly probably a 6.5 out of 10. And I watched the Ultimate Edition though. This movie gets shot up to a 10 out of 10 for me. I love Batman vs. Superman for trying to do something different. Instead of just being a movie about Batman and Superman who meet up, no Lex Luthor's the threat, put him in prison, and everything is fine at the end of the day. The more realistic type of world problems that were delivered into this film, the ideas of how would the world react to a man like Superman, all of the fears that his father had in the first movie were now being realized in the second film. Having Batman, who is just so fed up with what his life became, so fed up with whatever he did, nothing would ever work to stop crime. And all of a sudden, an alien comes down to Earth, and an alien that could wipe out the entire human race. This isn't your regular, ordinary comic book movie. This is a full-on dive into the analysis of what it would mean to be Superman, and frankly, what it would mean to be Batman, a man who has been doing this for over 20 years, and nothing ever gets better. Hope is completely lost in this movie. It only feels like things progressively get worse, and I like the idea of that because once again, you need to face adversity to gain that hope, which is what they end up doing by the end of the film, just with a couple of consequences and stakes involved. I could keep talking about all the elements of this film that I love so much, but then the video would never end. And love this movie or hate this movie, it's still talked about today. And from that simple fact, the movie has won. So from my perspective, at this point, the DCEU wasn't just on a good track for me, but it was something different. It was something completely opposite of what you were seeing from Marvel, and that is what I really wanted at that time. And frankly, that's even what I want right now. Next up is Suicide Squad from David Ayer. And the reason why I just did that is because was this movie really by David Ayer or was it by Warner Brothers? Regardless, at one point I had this movie at a 5 out of 10. When I look back at it now, it's a 3 out of 10. This movie is just completely pointless. It offers nothing to the overall world other than the continuation of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn in future projects. The beginning of the movie is somewhat promising, almost like a 7.5 out of 10 type of beginning, and then it completely drops off within the first half an hour and just becomes this convoluted mess of pointlessness. Do I blame David Ayer for this? Absolutely not. Do I think David Ayer's version of Suicide Squad would be better? To be honest with you, I don't know how it would be worse. Even if the movie is a 5 out of 10 in David Ayer's version, it's still gotta be better than what Warner Brothers gave us. I mean, say what you will about Jared Leto's Joker, maybe it wasn't gonna be good, but it's hard to judge him off of the super tiny appearance we saw from him in the film. Enchantress was just not a good villain. All the characters outside of Will Smith's Deadshot and Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn are pretty forgettable. And at this point, you just gotta laugh at how Warner Brothers loves to sabotage their films, and what makes it even funnier is they're still doing it to this day. Next up, you got Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman's very first live action film ever. This movie is a 7 out of 10 for me. I think it's really good. Overall, the film just works. The flashbacks work great. Her coming to man's world is executed really well because there are times where she's very naive and she doesn't understand how their world works. There are times where she almost acts like a giddy child because things are so exciting. And then there are times where she's got to put on her big girl pants on and be Wonder Woman. Her on-screen chemistry with Chris Pine is really good. It makes you feel like they were almost a couple in real life. Wonder Woman just in general is a solid beginning to her character. My biggest drawback is the last act of the movie, the fight against Ares. There are just a couple of things that really don't work for me in that ending, and I find it to be very lacking, but overall 7 out of 10, really good movie. Next up is Josstice League. I almost even considered putting this in the video, but I am, just so I can say 0 out of 10. This movie is the worst travesty, not just to comic film history, but to film history. The Room from Tommy Wiseau is a better movie than Joss Whedon's cut of the Justice League movie. That movie is despicable in every way. I absolutely despise that piece of garbage. It also makes it a lot easier to hate that movie now that we have Zack Snyder's Justice League. And also the fact that Joss Whedon and Jeff Johns are two pitiful men. Joss Whedon, a guy who can't even get a job anymore, and Jeff Johns, who seems, if he's not writing in comic book bubbles, he's not a good writer or creator at all. Both those guys can suck it, and Warner Brothers can suck it as well for trying to push this as a comic book movie, let alone a movie in general. And then we move into a masterclass of a 4-hour film. Zack Snyder should be in a conversation of making very long movies the way Francis Ford Coppola has, and Martin Scorsese, and Christopher Nolan. He took what the Justice League film should have been, he took a 4-hour movie at that, and made it a film that was loved by the fan base. Other than it being 4 hours long, which gives him enough time to do a lot of things, he made it feel fluent. Everything came together well. All the characters had an equal amount of screen time. Superman returning felt earned. Steppenwolf was actually captured properly. The fear of Darkseid roaming in the background felt like the future was in jeopardy. It showed that in one moment, Superman could be the gel that didn't just unite the Justice League, but could unite the entire world against evil. But in just one bad situation, he could also be the bane of existence. It will never not be despicable and disgusting by Warner Brothers for trying to hide this movie. It will never not be despicable that we never got the continuation of this world, especially because it wasn't going to take long at all. He only had 2 or 3 more movies in him. It would have been over by now. This film is another 10 out of 10 for me. I loved it simply because of how different it is. If I were to make a Batman vs Superman, or if I were to make a Justice League, my movies would look different from what Zack Snyder has created. But I love what Zack Snyder did so much with these films. They're 10s out of 10s, guys. Here is where DC films start to consecutively fall off for me, because I'll tell you all right now, there will never be another 10 out of 10 moving forward. Moving into Aquaman, when this film first came out, I had it at a 7 out of 10. When I look back at it now, it's a 6 out of 10. It's okay. It is nothing special at all. And would I ever watch it again? Absolutely not. I could drop this to a 5 out of 10 and I wouldn't even care. I think this movie is easily forgettable. I think it is a huge tonal change off of what DC is actually supposed to be and what they were building off of. And I say this all the time and I can't wait to say it again. It is the best Marvel film ever made by DC. If I wanted to watch Marvel, I would go watch Marvel. I'm not going to go to DC for that. And unfortunately, that's what they did with Aquaman. It was a fine watch to go to the movie theater, have a bag of popcorn, come home, and never watch the movie again. The very first Shazam movie and the very first DC movie, I actually didn't go to the theaters to watch it because I just couldn't care. I had a solid enjoyment out of watching it, and an enjoyment in the sense of I didn't waste my time necessarily. Could I have gone without watching this movie? Absolutely. And that's why I'm going to also give this a 6 out of 10. Another movie that is fitting the playlist of DC films made like Marvel movies. This is not a movie I would ever watch again. It's not a movie I would ever suggest somebody to watch unless they are really into that type of stuff, which then, you know, by all means go for it. But just like Aquaman, I watched it once, it was fine, never again. Next up is the Birds of Prey film, and the stupidest, utterly ridiculous, most idiotic title I've ever heard for a film with Harley Quinn. This is arguably one of the most pointless films that DC has made, even more pointless than the Suicide Squad movie. Even in saying that, I do think it's executed a little bit better. I give this movie a 5 out of 10. I think the funniest thing about the movie is that it's about Harley Quinn escaping from the grasp of Joker, and yet they never show Joker. The only scene they show him is just from the back, so it doesn't have to be Jared Leto. How do you make a movie that is so centered off of the relationship of her boyfriend and not even have him in it for at least 10 minutes? At this point in time, Warner Brothers have no idea what they're doing, because what they thought the fans wanted, they didn't actually want that. So here they are scrambling to create new ideas that just continue not to work. The movie as a whole is pointless. It's very forgettable. The only things I really do enjoy are moments with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, because she is a fun watch. Her performance is really good. The action sequences are a lot of fun as well. Even though I do not love Ewan McGregor as Black Mask, I love Ewan McGregor, so watching him is always a good time. But other than that, this movie is less than mediocre. As I was editing this video, I completely forgot to give my rating on Wonder Wonder Woman 84. I guess that's just another DC movie that's become completely forgettable. I'm not going to waste too much time on this film. It's a 4 out of 10. It's not a good movie. Next up is Suicide Squad by James Gunn. In complete honesty, another movie that is just pointless. It didn't need to be made. I mean, was this movie better executed than the last Suicide Squad? 100%. I give this movie a 6 out of 10. It was a fine theater watch. Grab a bag of popcorn, a nice large drink, sit back, relax, enjoy the more adult-like violence and action, and then, of course, the more childhood type of humor, which is really not my thing. Once again, I think the people in the movie are good. John Cena did a good job. Idris Elba did a good job. Margot Robbie did a good job. I think the fight scene between Rick Flag and Peacemaker is a really good moment, and that is the standout part of the movie for me. This movie is just a lot of, in the moment, it's fine, but when I'm done with the movie, it becomes, why do I care? A couple of hours from now, I'm not even going to be thinking about this film anymore. And it does really seem like that's what that movie has become. Next up, we have Black Adam. And when this movie originally came out, I gave it a 7 out of 10. I even have a review on the channel where I do give it a 7 out of 10. Like I said, opinions change. And when I look back at it now, it is a 5 out of 10. Some things I really like, some things I don't care for, or once again are just forgettable. Weirdly enough though, it is a 5 out of 10 movie that I enjoy. It is a somewhat bad film that I can have a good time watching. I mean, I don't think Dwayne Johnson did a bad job at Black Adam at all. I think Dr. Fate in the movie was really cool. Aldous Hodge as Hawkman was really fun to watch as well. The villain though was absolutely terrible. The friendship of the kid with Black Adam I thought was absolutely terrible, super hard to watch. Should this movie have maybe been R-rated? 100%, because I think if it was, a lot of things wouldn't have been taken away from the movie, and it may actually have even been bumped up to a 6 out of 10, or maybe even stayed at a 7 out of 10. Once again, this movie does fall into the trap of who cares. The hierarchy of DC is no longer changing with that film, so it's somewhat pointless. One of the good things in my book about this film is that Henry Cavill does show up as Superman, but once again, it gets kiboshed by a certain somebody, so this movie is just a meh. Don't really care. Finally, because I have chosen not to watch The Flash and Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 still aren't out, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods, in which I give this film a 3 out of 10. When this movie came out, I made a review for it and I gave it a 4 out of 10. I'm actually going to drop it and give it a 3 out of 10. I think Shazam! Fury of the Gods is just a straight up bad film. I don't think there's really much that saves this movie into being even a shred of enjoyable. This movie already gets 1 point for Mary Marvel because Grace is so good at playing that character. Also, the villains, the youngest sister who ends up turning good, how she can mold the world around her. I thought the visual effects on that type of stuff was really cool as well. I can't even give the movie a point for Gal showing up as Wonder Woman because it felt so forced and so pointless. It is just a straight up bad movie to me. But hey, you know what? It seems as if Warner Brothers has gotten used to making bad movies, especially with DC. But that's it for the DCEU films. Zack Snyder's trilogy of movies remains at the top for me. Wonder Woman comes in second with a 7 out of 10, and then everything else that holds a 6 out of 10, I'm not even gonna lie to you, could easily be dropped further to a 5 or a 4. I think I've just come to the realization that those types of movies are not for me. That's not the type of vibe I am looking for with DC. and that's just how it is. But now, everyone, let me know in the comments down below what some of your ratings would be for some of these films. Maybe even tell me your top 3 favorite DCEU movies. But with that being said, that's all I got for you. So until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.